I always feel a bit weird. Yeah, and that's it. I always feel a bit weird. No, I always feel a little bit weird as somebody speaking in the video game space as someone who really had fallen off of games for the most part after my childhood, and the lead up to the Switch was when I kind of came back on board. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, and the numbers show that there's a lot of other people in my same camp, but it does make me feel like I have, maybe a little less authority to talk about some of these things. Namely, I just fully missed out on anything that was on the Wii U, like, again, most of you did as well. But in the lead up to the Switch, a conversation that I remember happening was the excitement for Mario Odyssey because of the return to its roots, and within that, a little bit of residual disappointment maybe about what Super Mario 3D World was. I don't remember people saying it was a bad game, but I do remember people just being disappointed with the Wii U in general and feeling like they wanted something to return to form for 3D Mario in the sandbox style, again, like Mario Odyssey ended up being. So now Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is coming to the Switch, and everyone's looking forward to it, including myself for sure. So the things I want to talk about today is why am I personally looking forward to it? Also, why has everybody seemed to maybe change their tune on the game? And from that, how can we extrapolate this experience to talk about games as a whole? Let's talk about it. To kick it off, let me just tell you all the reasons that I'm specifically excited to play Super Mario 3D World on Switch. The first is another that fanatixfour regulars have come to expect by now, but I'm looking at this to potentially be the next game that my wife and I really enjoy playing together. Besides Animal Crossing, her go-to game genre is platformers. And it's surprisingly hard for us to find that good middle ground of platformers, ideally with multiplayer that have engaging mechanics, are easy enough to be able to make consistent progress, but hard enough to be a challenging level of fun. For example, although I'd beat Tropical Freeze when it came to Switch, we played that together this year and had a good time until around the 5th world, at which point none of the levels were fun to her anymore. At that point, there just wasn't time to rest and methodically make it through the levels one platform or two at a time. But rather, you've got to memorize longer stretches of level, and it's moderately punishing for new players if you're not able to do so. On the other end of the spectrum, we played Yoshi's Crafted World, and even though there's some cool mechanics there, I finished it on my own because of the completionist tendencies that I have, and she dropped off fairly early because it just wasn't all that challenging. But from everything I've seen, Mario 3D World's base game does a great job of balancing those ingredients and allowing multiplayer in the same somewhat open, linear environments without really getting in each other's way. Unlike the carnage that is New Super Mario Bros. In co-op. What a nightmare. So that's one reason that's more specific to me and others with family and friends you'd like to play multiplayer with. But I also do have to note that it's awesome that outside of Mario Maker, this will be the first time online multiplayer is possible in a Mario game. That's something that won't come into play a whole ton for me, but is a huge deal for all sorts of people, and for Mario as a whole. In general though, for the base game, I just think it's as simple as the fact that I like Mario games, I like platformers, and suffice to say, Mario is still a masterclass of level design and fun moments. This deluxe game especially is shown to have tweaked Mario & Co.'s speed and actual gameplay, and that really shows an extra level of care to go into this port to make the gameplay feel just right, especially when it was criticized for being a bit sluggish in the past. But all that is known quantities. On January 12th, we learned more details about Bowser's Fury, and this is the thing that'll solidify sales for this game, in my opinion. Some returning players may have just skipped on a port of the base game, and others may just not have thought the linear design was their cup of tea, or just don't like Mario games at all. But from the promotional material, Bowser's Fury is looking like a phenomenal side adventure in an open area with platforming challenges, collectibles, and a playable Bowser Jr., and it appears you can tackle these obstacles in any order. And at some point, I imagine after you collect a certain amount of cat shines or whatever, Bowser wakes up, shoots fire and platforms at you, and you've got to get out of the way and Gigantamax with a Giga Bell if you want to defeat him. All this looks incredible. The one question we all seem to have though is just how much of the content there is on offer, because seemingly this could be the entire gameplay loop, and we could very well have seen bits and pieces of the entire map so far. If so, that's cool, and it's great that it's a side mission, but that could very well be really short. However, However, my prediction is that we actually haven't seen everything there is to see, and that this is just a vertical slice of what this mode represents. It looks like not only is Bowser covered in his Fury goop, but so is plenty of other surface area. So I'm thinking that when you do fight Bowser and beat him, he'll retreat further away into the distance, some of his Fury goop will recede with him, which will make him stronger, but that previously covered area has now receded and will now be more of the map to discover and more secrets, and maybe just a bit more story to unveil as well. I'm guessing we'll have to fully beat Bowser 3 times before we actually beat the whole mode, but in the end, it'll feel like a pretty good side mission. It's also possible that after Mario beats Bowser and he retreats, he goes to a whole new area that's a fully separate sandbox that we have to explore, and there could be, I don't know, 3 or 3.5 of those. And you know, I hope I'm not hyping myself up too much, and maybe my perception of what already is shown is incomplete, but all in all, those ideas seem pretty feasible to me. At the end of the day, I mean, this is a Mario game, and it's gonna review really well, it's gonna sell well, port or not, and I also think it's a good way to end Mario's 35th anniversary, but kick off 2021. Finally, this is also one of the last Nintendo published Wii U ports, which means we're in uncharted waters on that front. Does that mean the start of mass 3DS remasters or Wii remasters or what? Well, one of the Wii remasters we're expecting at some point is Skyward Sword, and I think that game and Mario 3D World have something in common that I mentioned at the top of the video. These are both games that, while they reviewed well and are generally considered to be good games, they got kind of middling appreciation in their time, and now that they're coming back to the foreground, people are really looking forward to playing them again. Although with Skyward Sword, it's just speculated, of course. I mentioned earlier that at the start of the Switch, I had heard pretty mixed feedback on 3D World, and frankly, it wasn't really ever anyone saying that the game was inherently bad. It was just that a number of people just didn't care about it because it wasn't the thing they wanted. After it had been so long since Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, fans really wanted Nintendo to go back to that well and do a modern version of what we knew we loved from the early 3D days. Later, this did happen with Mario Odyssey, and interestingly enough, I think that's when the perspective shifted for 3D World. At first, 3D World was a hindrance in the way between what fans wanted and what Nintendo wouldn't give them, so maybe it was hard to see it for what it was instead of what it wasn't. I think the same thing was true with Zelda. Fans wanted Nintendo to do something different than what they did, but Skyward Sword was more by the book in a lot of regards. Oddly enough, I think the same kind of thing can happen even when it's not just doing the same thing again. Like Metroid Other M and Federation Force are generally agreed to have faults, but certainly don't deserve the vitriol they often get. Their worst offense was standing in the way of what fans wanted and Nintendo seemingly wouldn't give them. But here's the question. Does Nintendo owe it to fans to do exactly what they want? Because Mario Odyssey could be said to appease the Mario 64 crowd, and Metroid Prime 4 could be said to be the same thing, but I would argue no. AJ made a video this week about what things Breath of the Wild 2 should do differently, with a thesis statement that the opinions asking for the game to go back to its roots in every way are blatantly the opposite of what made the first game so great. Honestly, if Nintendo did everything the way fans wanted, Breath of the Wild wouldn't have existed the way it did in the first place. We would have just gotten a more edgy HD Ocarina of Time with a twist. This may also sound funny coming from a channel who constantly talks about Nintendo should do this or Nintendo should do that, but believe me when I say it's all out of a place of fun and hope for innovation rather than demands on a company that knows way better than any of us what it's doing. So where does that leave us with Super Mario 3D World? Well, I think the success and appreciation for this game will go to show that despite the things we want for a franchise as a whole, when a game comes out, it is what it is. Of course, it doesn't have to be your favorite thing of all time, but it can be helpful on a personal level to not fixate on the thing that it's not to frame our opinions. I would have loved for Pokemon Gen 8 to be the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon, but it wasn't. And I enjoyed Pokemon Sword well enough, but on its own merits, it didn't become my all-time favorite game or anything. I just enjoyed it for what it was and moved on. I'm learning that even in life, this is important. I can't will myself today to be the person I want to be next year. Some days my job may suck. Some days relationships may be hard. Most days, I don't live up to the expectations I have internally for who I'm meant to be. But also, today's just today. A game is just a game. Maybe the path ahead isn't the one we expect, but the twists and turns keep it interesting. But that's what I think. What do you think? Are you looking forward to 3D World and Bowser's Fury? Also, do you prefer Mario or Zelda games? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe to fanatixfour and like the video for more like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for watching. Peace and blessings.